Забава. Патот кондензира тога, да. Шала на страна си.
Забава. Па и бавцање јајца услед...
Нема врска. Суштина треба да се црни.
Иначе, пладивок ми е традиција само, не мора да се нешто.
Да, зато реков нешто. Од друга страна.
Може се почнеш.
Како да се
Само испушташ овие знаеш така. И само намести на сцена.
Си имате додевено кој од тебе табисите?
Јас сум Кош.
Океј, фала најмногу мртен. Може само зад вратата коласа.
Другите не знам.
Чива е ваша? Чива е?
Okay, hello. I think that we are ready to start. We have solved the network problems. So, what we're gonna teach today is about DRY, that stands for Don't Repeat Yourself, how to achieve that, and CSS naming conventions, and how SAS will help us to keep our code dry and to structure our web pages. So, naming SAS. According to my experience till now with making websites and typing CSS and HTML, I have found sometimes that naming the classes or IDs anyway are even harder than writing the code itself. And I'm almost 100% sure that all of you had the same problem sometimes. Can somebody agree with me?
Yes, of course.
So, what was the major problem that you faced while typing CSS, for example, or naming a classes in whatever language? Of course, what?
I didn't know what name to put sometimes.
Exactly. So, and what about not use IDs? Can the CSS typers say why?
Because you can only use it once.
Thank you. So, as I found on internet, and a very good way to structure or to name your CSS classes, they are divided in few categories. Functional class names, content-based class names, and presentational class names. Each of these will be now presented and explained. So let's start with functional class names. Should I be slower because I see you writing down? Okay. Functional class name, as the title says itself, it's styling of these elements based on their function, actually, or the meaning of the class. For example, we have important text, selected tab, or positive button. So, selected tab, the name itself, the name of the class itself says that we are styling some tab that is clicked, that is active, that is selected. So, it has a function. It is selected, and that's why these classes are named functional. Content-based class names, as the title itself says, are a class name that describes the content that contain. And these are very popular. Actually, I'm basically using these types of classes at most. So, for example, we can name some of them like submit button or intro text or profile photo. So the name of the class itself describes what the class is about. The last are presentational class names, and presentational class names describe the way an element looks like. So, for example, green button or dotted border or bold text. And these classes are more suitable to use when you want to reuse the code you're writing. So, as a conclusion of the naming those classes, so content-based class names work better for small sites, but when you have a huge structure of code and website presentational, actually the last class names that we talked about are the best for usage. Naming conventions. Let's imagine that you're working on some project, you're typing CSS, and you get a few days of vacation and some of your colleagues need to continue work there. So you want to leave well-structured and... Sorry? And what we're talking about? Okay, yeah, you leave the code for some of your colleagues to continue working on the website, and that colleague needs to find out through the code as fast as possible. So naming class like this here, for example, I find very hard to read. Do you agree with me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so one of the practices that are used for naming classes are like this example here, using hyphens between the words, or at least caps letter of the words. Yeah, capitalize. I think it's more clear and more human readable. Try, or as I said at the beginning, don't repeat yourself. And how to achieve that? First of all, I know that I'm pretty sure that all of you know that HTML and CSS should be apart. So you have a HTML file, you have a CSS file, not to combine those two in a same file, but to divide them. Sorry?
Inline CSS.
No, especially not use inline CSS because it cannot be overwritten by anything. So no matter how much CSS you will write down in your files, nothing can overwrite inline CSS unless you have important in the CSS file, which is also a bad practice. So, SAS. What is SAS? Why using it? And how SAS will help you to keep your code clean and to separate content from style, and why it's so popular nowadays, and because it's very, very easy to use and is nothing new but the very simple CSS, only structure on other way. So, what is SAS? SAS stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets, and I completely agree that those are awesome, and you will see later on why. Have any of you used SAS till now? Maybe?
No.
Not even you? Can you agree that those are helpful?
Yes, I have used SAS on many projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree that it's a lot easier, and you can write clean code with SAS and also use all the power and functionalities that it has. I actually like SAS.
Mm-hmm. Did you find it easier to handle those SAS files than CSS?
You write less code, you can easily debug, you can easily organize the code, and it's really helpful.
That's what SAS is all about, actually. So, one of the things that SAS has, and I can say that these are very basic things that you can do with SAS, are variables, nesting, mixins, inheritance or extent, and operators. Each of these will be explained further on by examples, so don't worry about it. This will come a bit later. So, SAS. have prepared a small example. So you can see the page here is really nothing special. Use some title, paragraphs, list, table, and some input elements, just so you can see. And how about the structure, the SAS that we talked about previously? This is nothing new. You have HTML files, CSS folder where your main CSS file will be, which will be included in the HTML file, as you can see right here. So that's nothing new, is how we do it all the time. And what is interesting is here in this folder called SAS, of course, and how I usually prefer to structure the files. And I found this way easiest for further usage. So as you can see, we have one main SAS file, SCSS, in which we import all the other files. They're structured in these folders right here. So let me start from the beginning. The base folder is where I put my base styles, and this resetter file that is you can always just copy paste it because it overrides the browser default styles, and that's why it is called, of course, it's imported in the main SAS file. Base file, it's where I usually put the basic styles. As you can see, also using comments in your files is very good practice, so you can know in which part of the file you have written a code and for what the code is about. So basic site styles. Who is using Bootstrap will know what this is all about. Overwriting some defaults. Site fonts. Here, for example, are used some Google fonts, so those are only imported. General site typography. The heading elements. Paragraph, links. This stands for Font Awesome. I hope that some of you have already used that. Maybe we can cover it in some other Touch Hub. Main, okay, and list. Also have page header breadcrumbs if those are used on the site, and of course buttons on the very end. That's all for the base. Components. The name itself says components on the site. So for example, you can write CSS for your homepage carousel. You can write CSS for forms, input style forms. So we have comment here for inputs. Select files, text areas, buttons, placeholders, and everything that is input or a form. Tables, as the name itself, where the tables that will be used on the site are styled. Also, always use comments. At least it's how I do, and I think it's very good practice. Just because, like I mentioned before, if you start the project, some of your colleagues need to continue working on it, so it will be easier to handle those files and to know which code is written where. That's the components. Those are the components. Helpers. These are very interesting files. Variables. One of the most interesting things that SAS is providing for us. I usually divide those things in color and site fonts. So we have variables. They are containing some value, as all variables do, no matter what programming language you're using. So this should be very familiar for all of you. And also site fonts. So in the further coding, I will show you this, of course, you are using the variables. instead of the hexa values, for example. Why this is cool? Because let's say, for example, for the purple color, for the purple variable, we have some hexa value that for now is this one that you can see on the screen right now. But what if the client, for example, wants this same purple color to have other, to be a bit darker or lighter, let's say. It will stay purple, but it can be a bit lighter or darker. So you're only changing the hexa value here, and when you will be recompile the style, it will be overwritten in all of your SAS files instead of going through each of them and to change the hexa by itself. So there are great possibility that you will skip some file, or let's say if you have a CSS files there that is huge, have thousands and thousands of lines, I'm pretty sure that you will get lost inside of it and you won't change the hexa value in all the places you have used before. So that's why I especially love the values in SAS. Variables, sorry. Mixings, for example, also pretty cool. So I have declined here border radius. So, and also for WebKit, Mozilla browsers, and the others. And I have also used this for the button on the side. I will show you later. Layout, as it say, header and footer, of course. On the site you cannot see some header or footer that have a lot of content, so this was just for example, but here in the code I have something more. This is taken from one site. And just to show you how you can structure the code inside. This is also important, nesting. So instead of writing in CSS as we usually do, navigation, then ULA, then li, so you have a long row of code, of classes. You can use nesting instead. So if your code is good structured, you can always see where it starts, where it ends, and you can never get lost inside because it's nested. And you can see where the things are beginning, where they're ending. So, as we're doing now.